We work for so many different companies and corporations and people in the Ergo Ego team. And one of the things that seems to be common for so many people across fields of expertise and what have you, is that they tend to tell us when we start working with them, they go, oh, well, you see, we're kind of stressed at the moment. We seem to be kind of a little bit rushed. We're kind of overtime on this or that or whatever it is we're doing. We've started replying, no, are you stressed out? That is so weird. We don't know anyone else who's busy, you know. The idea that being in a state of overwhelm and being in the state of stress has actually become quite normal and has actually become the way that very, very many of us live our lives. It's a little bit scary, and it is definitely the enemy of good performance. So if you go to, for instance, public speaking, when I see people who are really, really good and skilled public speakers, one of the things that they really know how to do is they might be super stressed before they go on. And then they kind of enter the stage and they just kind of go, and they are present. And they are able to convey whatever message they are conveying from a state of actually calming down and making sometimes every word count, and making the situation, the here and now, count. State of overwhelm, state of headless chicken. If this is a familiar state to you in any way, shape or form, working as a coach and as a trainer of people, this is one of the very important things to look out for. So, God, if I had a nickel for every time I start a coaching conversation and the person coming in to see me and sitting down in front of me is kind of going, so, hi, you know, and they are not present. They are not on top of their game. They are in a state of like on the way from one thing to another. One of the first things you can do, and it's actually a gift to give anyone this, is actually to help people become present and show up in the present moment. So in many ways, if you want to like increase your performance on any level, whether it's to do with anything that you're doing in a project at work, or whether it is something like public speaking, your capacity for knowing how to get yourself present and knowing how to help other people get present might just be the key to success. So if we have a look at what actually happens to us when we go into this state of stress or like activity and kind of being in a heightened state of nervousness or pressure, as opposed to when we are relaxed. Brain research actually can help us understand a little bit of what's actually going on inside us. So here you see the brain is kind of cut from the side, and if I look at this chart, what you'll see here, we'll try to make it very tabloid and very simple for our purpose this afternoon. The idea of stress actually creating an effect on the brain is very true and real. And if we look at this part here, actually the oldest part of our brain is what's commonly known as the brain stem, and it monitors a lot of stuff that is to do with things that, at least in the Western world, we don't spend very much time focusing on these days. Things like hungry or cold or thirsty are things that we would notice if you got too much of it, but it's being monitored by the brainstem all the time. And like I said, very often, because we're so comfortable and we live with roofs over our heads, in our modern day world, we don't really need to pay much attention to it. But another very important factor that is monitored by this brainstem part of the brain is actually whether we feel secure or not. Haha. So here we are onto this, like, for instance, stage fright straight away, aren't we? If you have an important presentation or something coming up, reason to believe, even a few weeks in advance, your brainstem will kind of be going, oh my God, there's trouble ahead. And it will be mobilizing you and actually wanting you to perform in the moment under pressure. Now, what happens when our brain activates us to perform under pressure is, and this is what psychologists tell us, actually is the proof that our brains, in many ways, still hasn't understood that we're living in a modern world. This very, very primal and old part of our system, the brain stem, actually reacts in a way which probably was very useful back in the day when we were living out there on the savannah and we needed to kind of protect ourselves against wild animals or what have you. Back in the day, those were the types of challenges that we were up against, of course. In our modern day, the stuff that happens to us when we mobilize in this like primal way really isn't very useful when we are performing in a modern day context. So what we experience, of course, if the brain stem starts monitoring us and starts monitoring our surroundings and going, oh my God, we are under pressure here, there's something frightening is coming up, is that we activate something, you might have heard of this, which is called the fight or flight response. Now, the fight or flight, taking place in this very ancient part of our being, like our uttermost primal being, is a huge and very big response that actually manifests in the body in a lot of ways. Fight or flight, you hear it straight away, don't you? So back in the olden days, if you experience fight, well, you might just be out there on the savannah trying to kind of fight for your life as some animal was trying to kill you. Or if you experience flight, you would be fleeing that same savannah and running for your life. Bring it into a modern day context, you know, fight might just be about sitting around in some kind of meeting and sensing that people are against you in the meeting, and your reaction, whether you are conscious of it or not, would perhaps be to become like defensive or argumentative or hot-headed. We all know this feeling, don't we, of like just losing it and then coming out the other end and going, oh my God, what just happened in there? Because we feel we've been threatened and we're reacting in this very primal way. If that's fight, I'm sure many of you out there have also experienced in our modern day sitting in some kind of meeting context and just kind of going, there are so many weird things going on right now, I'm not even going to say another word, we'll just see how this goes. And in a way, you are experiencing a modern psychological version of flight. So, fight and flight response. Bringing it into this topic of stress and overwhelm that I just mentioned, what the psychologists tell us is that all this stress, all this lack of time, all this like, oh my God, everything's got to be done so quickly, actually leads a lot of us to be far too much in this one way for the brain to function, the fight or flight response, or the reactive state, as the psychologists tell us, to call it. The reactive state, I love that terminology, simply because when we are reactive, we have reacted to something. We are actually in response to some kind of challenge or some kind of thing that we perceive to be threatening, unless we kind of give it our very best and react as much as we can, as quickly as we can. Not a good way to create excellence, this. So in a way, you can say the reactive state is like the enemy of great. Or, as you've probably heard, good is the enemy of great. When we react to stuff and we are no longer like the most sophisticated versions of ourselves, we may be primal, we may have a lot of like gumption and energy to fight, whatever it is we need to fight, but we are not our most sophisticated or calm or reflective selves. So here is like the second state that this slide talks about. I'll bring you over here for the idea of the prefrontal cortex. So if here I am at the very base of the spine, I'm at the very ancient kind of primal being that lies at the core of the oldest part of the brain, if we talk about the prefrontal cortex, we are talking about a part of our brain that actually is like 4% of the whole volume of the brain, and yet it uses over 25% of the calories that the brain uses every day. This is what's called the prefrontal cortex. And you might have heard about it simply because back in the old days when they used to do these terrible, terrible operations called lobotomy, basically what they would simply do is just lead a little pin into the brain and they would ruin this part of our brain. And by ruining that, they would ruin just about everything that was called that person's personality. So if you want to take good care of your personality, take good care of what lies right behind your forehead, what's called the prefrontal cortex. In there lies your ability to think in a sophisticated manner, your ability to kind of go out of the box and bring things from different parts together to create something, for instance, your ability to think in an abstract way, your ability to have morality or even ethics. All of this lies encapsulated in this tiny little part of your brain. Now, what is the relationship between these two parts? In terms of managing stress, if you're in this state, if you're in the reactive state, the reactive mindset will actually be trying to shortcut your access to this more sophisticated you. what it's actually looking to do is, of course, to make you react and be protecting yourself and not thinking sophisticatedly. So if I bring it back to the analogy of the savannah, if you're looking into the mouth of a lion, you mustn't be going, oh, that's an interesting mouth. You must be running, you know. So the idea of managing stress makes our bodies and our systems go to this reactive mode where we mobilize ourselves physically and we can't think clearly. Why am I telling you this? Of course, in order to counteract the effect of nervousness, i.e. the fight or flight, what we need to do is to find ways of getting back to the prefrontal cortex, getting back to the calm you, getting back to the kind of state where you can go, whew, I'm not sure I know the answer to that right now, I need to think it over. You know, when you're in a reactive state, if you've ever been on a presentation stage, I bet you've been going, I can't even remember my own name. You know, you need to actually revisit your own habits if you want to bring a calm version of yourself to the stage. How could you then possibly do that? One of the things to remember is that this stuff, the primal brain, is much, much stronger than you are. There's no need to try and argument in any cognitive or like modern way with these very primal responses in yourself. It might sound, if you try to, it might sound like this. Ooh, I'm feeling nervous, but I shouldn't feel nervous. I'm so experienced by now. I shouldn't have to, I shouldn't be nervous by now. I'm far too competent for this. Conversations like this would probably only lead your primal brain to actually react by getting even more nervous, getting even more escalated, simply because it's going, oh my God, she's not even listening to me, I better turn up the volume. A much, much wiser way of actually accessing and getting back to the prefrontal is, of course, trying to recreate calm somehow. One of the key ways in which to do that is by going through the physical. So if you can recreate a calm, breathing, not so heightened state of what's it called, like being ready for action body, then you will actually experience more calm, and you will be able to act in a more sophisticated and calm way. What I'm saying here translates very easily to just things like breathing, or even warming up your body, going for a run before some big performance. What do I know? Find ways of getting relaxed in your bodies, and you will experience that it's easier to get back into a more sophisticated version of yourself. Another way is just simply, of course, by realizing that you are stressed out. So even just catching yourself and going, how am I actually feeling inside in this moment in time? Oh, I'm super stressed. What about if I breathe a little bit? What if I just sit here quietly just for a mini second? This stuff doesn't need to take long. But the result is just so huge. If you can manage to start recovery from reactive to reflective, you are bound to be, your performances are bound to be becoming better. Okay, and to sum it all up for us, if I finally move over here, some top tips for stress management. Like I said, stress is a physical reaction. It has physical reactions. And what you need to do to counter them might just be to do something physical, like breathing exercises. Number two, knowing yourself. Finding out what your habits are and how you tend to react in stressful situations is absolutely key and will help you too. And finally, find ways in which to recover. And that sums up our little film on stress. Thank you very much.